What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Andy and I are going to do our third installment of kind of walking you through your pick range and guys to target in your fantasy draft coming up. So Andy, welcome to the channel. And we're going to get this thing kicked off. What we're doing today is we're going over our favorite draft targets if you have picks 9 through 12. If you're curious of looking up any of our other videos, we also went over 5 through 8 in a video and 1 through 4 in a video. But right now I'm going to throw up one of Andy's favorite targets if you're picking late in the first round. And Andy, that's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. What about him do you love as a first round target?
Well, Gibbs was the running back 3 from week 7 on, kind of when he started to take over the main bulk of the role as the running back for the Lions. He also had 5 top 5 finishes in that span. So not only was he fairly consistent, but he had that super high end upside to win you a week. And I think even if David Montgomery is still a big factor in this offense, if he's getting some touchdowns and they're still splitting this role somewhat, he's proven that he can still be a super effective running back 1. And I don't expect Gibbs' role to shrink. I think there's a better chance that maybe it grows just a little bit. But if it stays the same, he's the kind of guy who, with his speed, with his athleticism, that any touch he gets can be a house call. And there's, 10 points that you just got on one play. So, he's definitely below like CMC, Bijan, and Brees for me. But I think he's the start of this next tier of running backs where there's a bunch of them at this like 1-2 turn. And he's my favorite guy that I like to take there.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, 2 things I always look at when I'm trying to find an elite running back for my team. Are they on a good offense? Are they involved in the passing game? Jahmyr Gibbs checks both of those boxes. And just like you said, I'm really not concerned about him having to share the backfield with Montgomery. They were totally successful in doing it last year. I really don't see that changing. And these days, it's very, very tough to even find a backfield that has someone who dominates touches in that like 80% mark. And there's a reason guys like CMC, Brees Hall are going earlier because they are a few of the guys that can do that. I'm going with a running back here as my late round 1 target. I think Andy and I are kind of on the same page that unless one of these elite wide receivers slips to you, we really like going after a running back here because I just feel good about the wide receivers in round 2. And mine's going to be Saquon Barkley. I think this Eagles offense is going to be perfect for Saquon Barkley, who's been playing on a very bad offensive team basically his entire career with the New York Giants. This Eagles offense made Miles Sanders look like a stud, made DeAndre Swift look amazing last year. And I think Swift's a fine player, but Miles Sanders is really nothing. I'll just say there, he's really nothing. Miles Sanders is not a very
running back 3 on the
Panthers. He was basically an RB1 when he was on the Eagles. And Saquon Barkley is an absolute stud. None of us doubt his talent. He's involved in the run game. He's involved in the pass game. And I think he's just going to be a very effective running back for your team. And he's going to get some rushing touchdowns. He's going to get those catches. And I really like targeting Barkley here as well at the end of the first round. Now, moving on to the second round, Andy and I have the same target we both love because we both went RB in round 1. So, Andy, why is Garrett Wilson an amazing target if you're picking those swing picks in rounds 1 and 2?
Yeah, I think he is the one wide receiver for me in this range that really stands out. And I still like a lot of those other running backs. Like, I would still be happy if, I've got the 10th pick in like my main home league draft that you're in. Our brothers are in it. My wife is in it. And, if I go running back, I'm going to be still really happy. But if Garrett Wilson's there, he's going to be really tough for me to pass up coming around. It's going to be exciting to see what he can finally do with the quarterback. The Zach Wilson experience is over. We thought we were going to get to see it last season, and then 5 plays in, that was all taken away. He's super dynamic. He has the talent to be, the number 1 overall wide receiver for fantasy football. If Rodgers is 80% of what he was in Green Bay his last few seasons, he's the clear number 1 target on that offense. And Aaron Rodgers' last number 1 target, Davante Adams, was the wide receiver 6 or better for 5 straight years, including 2 number 1 overall finishes. I'm not saying Wilson is as good as Davante Adams, but he's definitely a player who could be. Like, he has that athletic ability. So, I think the upside here is like sky's the limit. And I think that there's still a really high floor for him as well. So he's a guy that I'm looking to target.
Yeah, basically everything Andy said. For me, Garrett Wilson is one of those guys where I tend to try and stay away from people who are being drafted at their quote unquote ceiling. And even though Garrett Wilson is being drafted very high for someone who's never really produced like this, he's going at wide receiver 8. And I think it's realistic that he could be a top 5 wide receiver. So I actually do think he could outperform his ADP. Whereas someone more like Drake London, let's say, I'm a little more concerned that Drake London's being drafted wide receiver 10, 11. And I don't know how much higher he could actually finish. But Garrett Wilson has that run after the catch and everything Andy said about Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is on a mission this year, which he totally could be, Garrett Wilson could be in for a monster season. Another guy I would like to bring up is I do like Puka Nacua, but at the moment I'm waiting to get a little more information about his knee. That if I was drafting in the next couple weeks, I think I would lean away from him. But if 3 weeks from now, early September, still before this season, he's been cleared to play, he looks fine, I think you could put Puka Nacua as well in this similar range because he's a young player and he's already showed us the upside that he has as a player. So swinging it back here to the third round, this is going to be the late third round because we're drafting late in the first round. Andy, who's your target for this round?
So I'm going after DK Metcalf, whose ADP is actually more in like the early 4th, but I'm comfortable grabbing him here in the late 3rd. He's entering his 6th season. He's still just 26 years old, which is pretty crazy. And he finished as the wide receiver 15 last year, and he's being drafted at wide receiver 20. And it seems like this offense is, going to take a step forward. Last year, they were dead last in time of possession, dead last in offensive plays run. And he was still a top 15 guy, top 17 guy in points per game. He has double-digit touchdown upside. He's that big-bodied guy. Their new offensive coordinator came over from the University of Washington and has compared him to Rome Odunze, who absolutely flourished in the offense that they ran there. So I think you're getting, a player who could finish way higher than his ADP. So yeah, I'm all over DK at this part of the draft.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. For my third round target here, I'm actually doing someone that is a slight reach as well. I will put a little asterisk on this, and I'm sure Andy would say the same. We both do love Jalen Waddle at this pick as well, if he happens to fall. But we've spoke about him a little bit, and we're trying to give you guys some more targets that we like. Jalen Waddle is kind of going in the late 3rd, but we were both comfy reaching on him. So late 3rd, he obviously would be a great pick as well. But mine's going to be Michael Pittman. I just think he's going to be in a good offense. I think he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver there. It does look like Josh Downs may have had a freaky little injury. We'll see how bad that is. Hopefully he's fine. But just in general, Michael Pittman has been a very solid player for your fantasy team. He may not have the touchdown upside that some of these other guys ahead of him have, but he is the solid number 1. He's going to catch a lot of balls. And he has what we are considering to be a top 10 quarterback in fantasy, throwing him the ball. And those are all things I love to get, especially in this build. He's not even going to have to be our wide receiver 1 because we have Garrett Wilson up ahead of him. So in round 4, it looked like Andy's going back to wide receiver with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I mean, this whole section of the draft, like one of the reasons why sometimes I do like starting out running back is because I usually love who I'm getting at receiver at the 3-4 turn. But I'm also happy going RB, wide out. And, guys like Devonta Smith, DK, Michael Pittman, and Cooper Kupp, I think are all great picks. And I liked him here when Puka was still healthy. I think this is about where he should go. But, if there are any questions with Puka's knee throughout the season or even just starting the year, I think this is an absolute slam dunk pick. I mean, it was just 2 years ago, he was wide receiver 2 in points per game. I think, he's 31 years old, so he is getting a little bit up there, but he was never like the most athletic guy on the field. He was always an elite guy at beating zone coverage. And, he still knows how to read a defense, where to find the soft spots. He and Matt Stafford obviously have such a great connection. And he actually out-targeted Puka Nacua in the red zone last season. So he still seems like he's their number 1 red zone guy. So if you're coming in, you're taking him as your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I mean, I just love the value.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Cooper Kupp down the stretch last season. I think he had a couple of shaky games kind of in the middle of the year fitting in that offense. I do think he was still just a tiny bit hurt. But coming down the stretch, I mean, him and Puka Nacua were both very playable. Weeks 13 through 17, Cooper Kupp's fantasy finishes by week 21, 5, 4, then a 42 and a 29. But you're drafting this guy to be your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3. You're not picking him at pick 13. So it's okay to target someone that has those up weeks and those down weeks. And I think Cooper Kupp is in the offense to do that. And someone who I actually think is in a very similar position is going to be DJ Moore, who finished as a top 10 wide receiver last year. But we all know the changes that happened in Chicago. They got a rookie quarterback, which I think is an upgrade over Justin Fields. But the one thing that we do have to be a little concerned about is the addition of Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, which is why I think DJ Moore has actually been pushed down draft boards a little bit. I think if they don't add one of those guys, and there's only 2 good wide receivers in that wide receiver core, I think DJ Moore might be going in the second round at that 2-3 turn. But just kind of like Andy said about Cooper Kupp, there's a bunch of upside with DJ Moore, and I do still project him to be the number 1 target in this offense, especially down the field. So if we can see Chicago have a better passing game than we've had in the past, which really isn't a hard bar to reach, I am like 95% sure the stat is right that Chicago's never had a 4,000-yard passer. I feel like I hear that.
100% correct.
Yeah. So it's a pretty low bar when it comes to the passing game for the Bears. And I think Caleb Williams is going to take some shots, and DJ Moore is probably the guy that is going to be the first one of these wide receivers he's looking at, and he has the biggest upside for a season. So in round 5, looks like Andy's going running back with James Conner.
Yeah, so, we got a couple old guys for me coming up. James Conner, though, crazily enough, had his best year last year, and especially when Kyler was back healthy. He was the running back 2 between weeks 13 and 17. And I don't expect a top 8 finish from him. You're not drafting him to be a top-end guy, but if he can stay healthy, this offense is only going to be better with the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., with a healthy Kyler Murray, and he will get plenty of opportunity to get the touches. It doesn't sound like Trey Benson is, pushing him too hard to be given that RB1 role. I think this is still James Conner's backfield. So, it might not feel, it's not the sexiest pick. You're drafting a guy who's a little bit older, but I still think he can add a lot of value to your team, especially if this is like your running back too.
Yeah, it really kind of is playing the injury card. Like you said, if James Conner's on the field, he's going to be involved and he's going to be a great player. We're just going to cross our fingers that he has one of his healthier seasons. But even so, there's something to be said about having a player produces when he does play, and you can still play other players the weeks that he's not in. I think that's something that gets a little overblown sometimes in fantasy leagues, is that, as long as they're producing when you start them, it's really not a huge deal if they miss a couple weeks here and now. So in my build, I'm looking at the stack here, and I'm going to stack Anthony Richardson with Michael Pittman. I haven't really been targeting too high of quarterbacks in either of my strategies so far, but in this one, I was looking at ADP, and if I'm targeting Michael Pittman in round 3, I think Anthony Richardson is the perfect guy to add to my team here. Add some upside and add a quarterback who has the potential to be a top 3 quarterback overall. He was on pace to be that in a points per game sense last year. Now, obviously, he really didn't play that many games, so those stats are kind of, they're a little fishy because we didn't really get the full season. We didn't let defenses, quote unquote, figure him out as much as you want to say, but we all know the rushing upside is going to be there with Anthony Richardson. Andy, what about Richardson do you love as a guy to target if you are looking more in this round 4, 5, 6 range at quarterback instead of 2, 3?
Yeah, his upside, like you said, is one of those number 1 guys. He can definitely get to 10 rushing touchdowns. He is great at running the ball as long as he can stay healthy and maybe avoid some of those really high contact hits. But at the same time, watching him pick up that 4th down last year where he just bodies 2 defensive linemen or linebackers to gain an extra 5 yards is awesome to see. But, this is definitely it's a little riskier too, just because, we have such a small sample size, but, you're talking about trying to win your league. And if he hits, and you have a top 5 quarterback or top 3 quarterback this late in the draft, then that really puts your team to the next level. So we talked about him in the offseason as a dynasty trade guy. I love Anthony Richardson from what I saw from him last year. Him being able to read some defenses maybe wasn't always the most accurate, but he made a lot of amazing throws and can do a lot of crazy stuff when he's scrambling around. So yeah, he's a guy I like.
Yeah, I mean, if he stays healthy, man, it really does. I remember the feeling that we all had a couple seasons ago going into that monster Jalen Hurts year, where it was like he wasn't going early in the draft, but every time you drafted him like the 5th or 6th round, you thought you just won your league. And Anthony Richardson kind of feels like that, where it's like, if this dude stays healthy, I think you could just have a massive difference maker at the position. So Andy going back to back in his veteran selling off his old pieces looking dynasty team right now in James Conner and Aaron Jones. Andy, Aaron Jones, is this just a Packer thing, or do you actually like his chances on the Vikings this year?
I mean, I do, and I will also say there's a lot of other guys we talked about, like Christian Kirk, Pickens, Reed, who are kind of going in this range too. I love a lot of those guys too. There's still great wide receivers on the board. But as far as running backs, he's another old man guy, and it's the same with Connor. If he's healthy, he is electric, and he definitely still has juice, even though he's getting up there in age. I mean, he put up 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys in the playoffs, had an absolute monster game, over 100 yards against the Niners. The last part of the season when they were making that final playoff push and when the games really mattered and he was the guy, he proved that he is still that guy. So I don't think, the Minnesota offense is going to be as dynamic as the Packers was last year. But also, we talked about with a rookie quarterback, maybe they're going to want to try and run the ball more. Maybe there's going to be more opportunity for him to get receptions, especially with TJ Hawkinson to miss a few games and, potential suspension coming for Addison. So, in this range, this late in the draft, I think he still has some, very high ceiling week to week. It's just the consistency from him and then also injuries that, are a little bit of a knock, but it's round 6.
I like how you targeted both of these guys because I think in a realistic sense, let's just say between James Conner and Aaron Jones, you're getting a great running back too.
Yeah.
And let's not think too much more into it. This is why you build depth at running back in Dynasty, in redraft. It's because most running backs are not going to make it through the season playing every single game. But guys like Aaron Jones, James Conner bring you weekly upside. And if they do stay healthy, they have a chance to be that difference maker for your team. Someone that I think is kind of slipped just a little too far this year in redraft is going to be David Montgomery. Now, I'm looking at David Montgomery's stats from last year. Number one, I don't know if you guys all remember, but he had 13 rushing touchdowns last year. First off, which is a crazy high number. And not only did he have 13 rushing touchdowns, he missed 3 games, and he only didn't have a rushing touchdown in 3 of the games he played. He basically was a given for a rushing touchdown in every game. And as much as we love Jahmyr Gibbs, Andy and I both are targeting him in this build. I just don't see too much changing, which is why I still think Gibbs and Montgomery are fine picks for your team. We looked at that Lions offense last year, and they were absolutely humming. I don't really see a reason to change that too much. They want Gibbs to stay fresh. That was something that they really valued. And let's not forget, Dan Campbell came from the Saints. He coached with Sean Payton. This is really Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram to me all over. And both of those guys were top 15 running backs multiple years in a row. And I just don't think that's going to change. Montgomery is really good at certain things. Jahmyr Gibbs is really good at certain things. But Montgomery's going to be on the field. He's great in short yardage, and he's great at pass protection. And sometimes we overthink those things, but he's going to get the snaps because of it.
No, I definitely agree. And, that stretch where Gibbs was the running back 5, Montgomery was the running back 13. And so here you're getting him late in the 6th round. And also, if something does happen and Gibbs goes down, David Montgomery is now a very high-end RB1 on your team. So there's still massive upside, and he's still got the floor because he does have a place in this offense. So
So now moving into round 7, Andy's targeting a rookie wide receiver here. Andy, what do you think McConkey's upside is this year, and why do you like him as a round 7 pick?
I feel upside is probably a solid wide receiver too. I don't think he's going to have a Ja'Marr Chase, Puka Nacua type season, but you're getting the probable wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert. Even though that offense wants to run the ball a little bit more, it's still, at the end of the day, a passing league. You have Justin Herbert as your quarterback. Chargers are still going to throw the ball. A lot of talk about Greg Roman and Harbaugh coming in. They're going to be running. Yes, that's true, but they still have to pass. They can't run every single play they're out there. And he was drafted in the high second round. I think he was the 34th pick overall, 33rd pick. There were still lots of talented wide receivers left on the board. So the Chargers obviously really liked him and saw a fit for him in this offense. So, I'm not going to be surprised, honestly, if he turns out to be the second best rookie wide receiver this year. I think Marvin Harrison has a title, and I think Malik Neighbors is going to be great, but I also wouldn't be surprised if just McConkey, because I think that offense is going to be better, has a few more touchdowns and has a little bit more, the same amount of volume that a certain wide receiver in New York might also be getting. But not projecting it, just saying I wouldn't be surprised.
So I really like this addition to Andy's strategy, and I don't know if he did this on purpose or anything, but I kind of like targeting a rookie wide receiver if you're going to veteran running backs right before this. Connor and Aaron Jones are probably going to be strong to start the season, and then maybe as the season wears on, McConkey kind of takes over, and he can be your flex instead of having to start one of these other running backs. For my round 7 pick here, I'm going to go Terry McLaurin. This is just a value pick for me. I kind of like this ADP he's going at. I was looking at my team. This is going to be my 4th wide receiver. So I think I'm just okay to kind of live with the ups and downs that Terry McLaurin's going to have. I think he's going to have some really good weeks because I do think Jaden McDaniels can put the ball down the field, which is something McLaurin really hasn't had in his career too often. But I do think he's going to have some lower weeks just with the running upside of Jaden Daniels. And just he's a rookie quarterback, right? We talked about it last episode. Rookie quarterbacks are going to have some great stretches, but they're going to have some games that they struggle in when they see new defenses or they play really good head coaches. But in general, round 7 for Terry McLaurin, I think a couple years ago you were having to take McLaurin in round 4, round 5, and I really don't feel that different about him. I just think he kind of is just worn down on people, and people are just a little lower and a little less excited about him than they were a couple years ago. So moving into round 8, it looks like Andy's going another running back, a very RB heavy build for him. So Javonte Williams, Andy, what's up with this pick? And are you buying the camp stuff this summer, or do you just think it's kind of overblown?
We talked about it a little bit last episode where, as you get later on into the draft, targeting some running backs where there is kind of a convoluted backfield. And, this gives you a huge upside if you hit. He was drafted with the 35th pick in 2021. He was played pretty well as a rookie and then was off to a pretty hot start when he tore his ACL. And, last year, obviously, he was drafted a little bit higher, and he's not Adrian Peterson. He wasn't able to bounce back from that. But if he does earn the starting job in this offense, any offense that Sean Payton coaches, they love targeting the running back. Of the 7 top seasons of running back targets, if that makes sense, 6 of them were teams coached by Sean Payton. He loves targeting the running back. Last year, the Denver Broncos had 123 targets go to the running back, 12th most all time. I don't think that's going to necessarily change. So I think there's still some massive upside from Javonte if he turns out to be the lead dog in this backfield, which I think he will be.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a huge Javonte Williams fan, but it's round 8. At this point, all of these guys we're targeting are going to have things that they're battling with. Javonte Williams can we forget about his last year? Was it just due to the injury? Or is this kind of just the player he was? Because, looking at his last season, he had a ton of touches. I think he had 264 touches, but he was basically one of the least efficient running backs in the league. So we'll see if he repeats those numbers. And if so, like maybe you don't play him, but you're really not investing too much. Someone that I like here targeting in the 8th round is Tyjae Spears, one of my favorite dynasty targets as well. I've been talking about Spears for like 2 years, and I just don't think I'm ever going to shut up about it. He is in one of those ambiguous backfields, and at the moment, Tony Pollard is going in front of him. So I just think Spears is at a great ADP. I think he has a 50-50 shot to be the lead back in that system. And he also just has in a built-in floor because I think it's also very likely that these guys kind of just spell in and out, and they're both playable, flexible running backs for your team this year. Andy, are you team Pollard, team Spears, or are you just team whoever goes second? I would be more likely to take that guy.
I think I'm more team Spears, and especially you're getting him at either a full round or 2 full rounds of value over Pollard. I mean, Pollard looked so great when he was in a complimentary role, but last year in Dallas with all the opportunity in the world, he didn't look that great. And, I think that Spears could definitely win this job. I think he's a little bit more electric at this stage in their career, and you're getting him later. So I'm all about it.
Yeah, I just checked. He's going RB 27 is Tony Pollard, RB 35 for Tyjae Spears. So I think at that discount, I'm definitely pretty happy to target Tyjae Spears. And Andy's got one more tip for us before we get out from this video. So Andy, what would you like to talk about to finish the video off?
Yeah, this is the super secret helpful tip if you made it all the way this far. And that is if you are drafting early, you're drafting, next week, you're drafting in mid-August, even towards the end of August. And right now you don't have to draft a kicker and a defense. Those are guys that I'm very happy streaming based on matchups and, if they're playing in a dome, whatnot. So use those roster spots when other people are taking kickers and defenses to grab some backups, grab some handcuffs, grab some guys with upside where if an injury happens in the preseason or an injury happens in training camp, you have a guy that is now super valuable for fantasy football. And then if nothing happens, drop him before the season starts, pick somebody up. Right now, one of the guys I love is Justin Fields. The reports out of Pittsburgh, or he's been lighting it up in camp. Russell Wilson's been injured, and we went into the season thinking, oh, it's definitely Russell's job. But now there might be a little bit of a quarterback controversy. And even though Justin Fields, hasn't proven that he's a great NFL quarterback, he's had some amazing fantasy football stretches based on what he can do with his legs. So he's a guy like, Jordan Mason out of San Francisco. Just grab these high-end handcuffs that are still on the board. And, maybe you get lucky and sweet. Now you got a guy who's worth a 4th round pick in the 16th round.
And one more thing to add from both Andy and I, in both of our builds, we were suggesting our targets today. Neither one of us ended up targeting a tight end in the first 8 rounds. There's still probably going to be some good guys. Rounds 9, 10, you could definitely look to get your tight end, whether it's Njoku, someone we've spoke about before. I really like Jake Ferguson. And Andy and I are hand in hand that our favorite late round tight end to target is Pat Freiermuth if you end up waiting till that point. Freiermuth is going outside the top 12 of tight ends, and we both just really like his upside as potentially the number 2 passing option there in Pittsburgh. But Andy, thank you for joining me, buddy. As always, check Andy out on Twitter, guys. I think it's just Andrew Mikola, correct?
Yeah,
I definitely tag it sometimes. But,
I don't tweet too much, but I need to start tweeting more.
But he's got a dynamite profile picture. But thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to help you win your league. Check out all the other videos on the channel. If you enjoyed what you watched, you made it this far, please hit subscribe so you can come back and click the little notification thing so you know when the next video is coming out. But we appreciate you guys and take it easy.
Thanks, guys.